Welcome to another episode of NEWFORUM. As a community podcast, we're committed to delivering engaging and enlightened discussions and conversations with visionaries, creators, developers, and investors on topics related to crypto, the metaverse, NFT, and everything Web3. In today's episode, we have the privilege of hosting Michael Parenti, a prominent figure in the crypto space as a crypto-realist and ecosystem integrator. Michael is also the co-founder of Parallele Polis and InterSpaceChat. He's going to share more about that shortly. Joining him is our very own Sofyan, the architect and founder of New Foundation, which powers NEWFORUM. Together, we will delve into a thought-provoking conversation exploring their invaluable perspectives on the evolution of crypto with a particular emphasis on the subject of identity. Stay tuned for this insightful conversation. Hey, Michael, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So let's begin with a quick intro about your background and how you fell down the crypto rabbit hole. And maybe we can talk a bit about why you decided to build and shape the crypto space.
So I've been online since 1982 when it was ARPANET. And that means it was a network of universities and military industrial complex research centers that were linked together in the original days. And so I went to university to get an email address, which was, kind of like the cool thing to do at the time. And so I grew up with the internet, and I've always basically been around, the people that have been, thinking about communication, technology, society, writers, cyberpunks, so it's just kind of like a natural part of my childhood and growing up. And so that means that I was always online in different message boards and mailing lists and forums and whatever. And I've always been hanging out with and working with coders that are somewhere on the spectrum who have been building the tools that I was using, primarily as a media guy. So I grew up with desktop publishing and desktop graphics and desktop video when it came along. And so always in this sort of nerdy creatives and activist sort of culture. And so one of the lists that I was on was the Cypherpunks mailing list. And, so I've been on that for years, and we had attempted to do different types of digital currencies, internet native currencies. There's BitGold, there's Liberty Dollars, and are some of the ones that people have heard of. So, when Bitcoin came along, it was just the next attempt to make a non-state currency that was based on the experiences which came before. And so it's not like I really decided to go down the rabbit hole. I've been living in rabbit holes like my whole life. I mean, it's funny to think about it. So astrologically, I'm actually a rabbit in Chinese astrology. So living and burrowing and having exits and, is kind of like really been part of something that I've always been doing. So that's, how it sort of happened that I was aware of Bitcoin. And so, Bitcoin wasn't really, people look at it now like those of us who saw it and knew about it from the beginning are all these incredibly wealthy and smart people that went, yeah, fuck, this is going to change the world. This is everything. It's the answer to everything. It's better than sliced bread. It can make coffee for you, and it will solve slavery and, stop war. No, it wasn't like that at all at the beginning. We were all pretty, critical of Bitcoin. And as nerds, like to be, if you're on Twitter or if you're on Discord or Telegram or any of the electronic communications platforms, people are always arguing to the death about somebody else being wrong on the internet. And it was pretty much the same way at the beginning. So all of the arguments that we're having about consensus networks and proof of stake, proof of work, Sybil attacks, all of these different things, and how those are, privacy, decentralization. There's not really a new argument in the book, so to speak, right? And so Bitcoin was at the beginning was pretty torn apart by most people, and we were all sort of bloodied and cynical about what had happened with BitGold and with Liberty Dollars. So it was more of like, okay, here's this interesting concept, and here's this code, download it, and try and get it running. So I mean, I downloaded it, Bitcoin D, and I was at my hackerspace in Vienna. It's called MetaLab, and syncing the blockchain was not really what I was into leaving my laptop open for in a lab full of hackers, so overnight or whatever, where I had the internet connection at the time. So I couldn't really be bothered with it. And, we were all discussing it in there. And then the first ASIC miners came along, which were little USB, miners that you plugged into your laptop, maybe a cluster. And then we were having arguments about energy usage in our collective hacker space. And, so it was all really interesting and an intellectual endeavor, but it wasn't something like that most of us looked at and went, okay, man, fuck, we're going to get really rich on this thing. You know what I mean? So that dialogue came later for crypto. And the place where it is that the light really went off for me about Bitcoin having a use case is, so from in like 2010, 2011, all of that time in there, I was involved as an online creative during the Arab Spring and WikiLeaks and Anonymous and Occupy Wall Street, doing real-time memeing. I mean, it's pretty common now, but people weren't really doing, Photoshop memeing at that time in real time. And so that's what I was doing. I was involved with all of these nerd cult, sort of, privacy and activism people. And it was all really exciting and heady at the time. And then WikiLeaks was censored by PayPal and by Bank of America. And so that's when the use case for Bitcoin sort of, went off for me as, oh, okay, so we can really use this to collect donations for WikiLeaks, which is a community that I was part of. And Bitcoin was at that time, I don't know, $16, $18, something like that. And, it had established itself as a currency that people were willing to accept. And, so all of those things like Bitcoin Pizza Day came along, and all these things were, they happened very, very close with each other, where we went, oh, hey, we actually have a non-state money, and we have this decentralized network, which I don't know, I kind of disagree with whether it's truly decentralized, more of a distributed network. So across multiple jurisdictions, which, gives it the censorship resistance. And so that's when I took Bitcoin seriously for myself. And so being online in these different groups and on the forums and things, there wasn't a lot of us. There was maybe 500-600 people at the beginning, of coders and activists and whatever, that kind of like 600 people is a group of people where you can know most everybody, right? And so as a result of that, I got to meet a lot of interesting people, a lot of the early Bitcoin core programmers, a lot of the early Bitcoin evangelists. And as a result of being in that sort of social network, I ended up becoming the system administrator for the Bitcoin Foundation. And that was really interesting. I was at a very, very interesting time. I joined the Bitcoin Foundation right as Mt. Gox was collapsing. And Mt. Gox is, an exchange that was written by a guy named Mark Karpeles, who was one of the founders of the Bitcoin Foundation, along with people like Peter Vessnes and John Matonis and Roger Ver and Charlie Shrem, all of this group of really, really interesting characters, who formed Bitcoin in the early days. And so I was the system administrator there for a couple of years when all of this, when Silk Road was happening and all of these different things. So it was a very interesting time. And Vitalik Buterin was, part of the Bitcoin community, and he was advocating for building other things on top of Bitcoin that Bitcoiners weren't really interested in, and said it couldn't be done. Bitcoin Script, which is now getting a lot of attention from younger developers because the environment has expanded quite a bit. Wasn't really that expanded in those days. And so Vitalik Buterin was part of our community, and he was one of the founders of Bitcoin Magazine, and so he got run out of Bitcoin basically, and decided to launch Ethereum, which was an ICO on Bitcoin. So with all this tribalism that we have now, people forget that Ethereum was funded by Bitcoiners. You had to have Bitcoin to buy Ethereum. Aside from the distribution that was given to people that were participating in that. So that was kind of, so I was the first person that ever tweeted about Ethereum when Vitalik did a blog post. He was completely, really unknown guy at that time. And I later sold that as an NFT. Very interesting, funny, the first tweet about Ethereum. So then came the Bitcoin block wars, and Bitcoin was getting incredibly toxic at that time, and was very, very resilient and resistant to any sort of development. And Ethereum came along and took along that role of moving fast and break things. And we know what's happened since Ethereum was started. We have all of these different coins and networks and chains and everything that have happened. And so Ethereum really won the mind share of developers and people, because Bitcoin was this exclusionary sort of, very, very conservative network of people. And Ethereum, you can see it in the unicorn graphics and everything, and just the whole take the piss, we're having fun, sort of an environment that's been there from the beginning. Has been a direct response against this sort of conservatism of Bitcoin. And since I'm culturally or even generationally, being born in 1963, and growing up in California, I'm sort of like half hippie and half punk, so it's kind of like a, very, very similar and in different ways, cultural movements that are about freedom and resistance and do-it-yourself culture and everything. And I found those people again in Ethereum. And those people really weren't in Bitcoin in the early days. In the early days of Bitcoin, it was gamblers, physics people who understood thermodynamics, right? And then came the libertarians and sovereign movements, and the crypto anarchists, which is, we'll speak later about Parallele Polis as being part of that. So I found a lot of interesting and motivated people that were playing around with all kinds of different ideas in this network that Ethereum enabled, and so got involved with producing and participating in hackathons and conferences and that sort of stuff. And as a result of that, met different projects that interest me, that came from a values base, and worked with different projects across the space. And then came the next wave of corporate chains, of Solana and and Cosmos and Polkadot. And so Bitcoin is kind of like the grandfather of all of this stuff, and none of those things would have happened without Bitcoin. And so I've always just sort of followed around the people who are thinking and trying new things, and that's been my interest in the space. And so since I come out of a long tradition of sort of like resistance culture and do-it-yourself culture, I've always, and then my experience in the two largest tribes in crypto, always saw myself as sort of not really an ambassador, but sort of like a bridge between different communities and people. And so I've always run around and said, hey guys, we're punching up, we're not punching sideways, and competition is good. It brings the space forward. It brings us all forward. There's different use cases for these different things, and we don't need any permission to experiment with them. And so I find all of this wild west aspect of different consensus algorithms and different skin in the game participation, different so common goods funding projects like Gitcoin and Giveth and all there's so much exciting stuff in there if you're an open, honest person to change and experimentation with new systems. So that would be about the shortest introduction to myself that I could give without getting into too much details. And so most recently, I'm sort of like drifting again back into the Bitcoin space because I'm a little bit dissatisfied with the direction that things have taken in other networks. There's a lot of money out there, and people are forgetting about privacy. People are forgetting about decentralization. They're forgetting about these things, and so there's a real focus in not only the Bitcoin community, but with other coins like Monero and Zcash, and the work that's being done by a lot of the other. So I'm not alone in this, actually. People like Amir Taki from DarkFi, that are exploring, and Harry Halpin from NIM, that are exploring other models that are, filling that gap of privacy and censorship resistance, and hoping to, maintain some sort of decentralized, network. And we haven't really hit the one thing yet. You know what I mean? It's like the pieces of the puzzle are out there, but we haven't really nailed it yet. And I definitely don't believe in one coin to rule them all. There's 187 countries or nations on the planet, and God knows how many languages. We have different currencies for different use cases, different cultural ways of looking at money, different ways of looking at social organization, consensus rule sets, governance. And so I'm more from, I want to be able to move as frictionlessly as possible in and out of consensus rule sets. And whether it's a freedom to, it's always about a freedom to transact, whether it's about information, whether it's about copyright and royalties and provenance, or whether it's about actual money. I want to be able to move in and out of these different networks, and that are in the end social networks. And we're so fixed on these things about being about currency or other things, but actually they're social networks. And this whole idea of permissionless opting in and opting out is pretty phenomenal if you look at the world around us today and how everything is imposed on us. It doesn't matter whether you're in a social democrat, communistic, top-down, centrally planned, or democratic, capitalistic republic, or whatever it is. I mean, everywhere on the planet at the moment, everything is about capital. Capital has captured everything, is driving the destruction of the environment, and is driving the destruction of our social systems, and whatever. So I want to have as many opportunities as possible. Some have, everything has different trade-offs. How much privacy do you have? How much decentralization? How much risk are you taking? How much can you potentially gain in these permissionless systems? And so was at the conference a couple of weeks ago in Prague, where we did ETH Prague at Parallele Polis. I had the chance to meet Sofiane, who explained to me his proof of creativity, and so I just sort of like introduced him to people that I thought that he would connect with, and we had amazing conversations. And so here I am, still at the front edge of where people are tinkering around with these things, because like I said, we haven't nailed it yet. And I like having different consensus rule sets, right? And so
awesome. Well, Michael, I have to ask a question because I cannot wait to ask it. Are you Satoshi?
Of course I'm Satoshi. We're all Satoshi. No, I'm not Satoshi.
Yeah, I really clicked with the way you think. Thank you so much for joining us today. What I love, so a lot of people are very smart in the crypto space. But what I love about the way you think is that there is wisdom on top of the intelligence. You have this like detachment and open mind and honesty about things, like no bias, and you just take it easy and you just like, look at the space with a neutral mind about, what can benefit us and not necessarily what can benefit my coin or stuff like that. And it's rare and it's very refreshing to have this kind of conversation. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the compliment. But allow me to correct you, though. It's not that I don't have my biases, okay? But I mean, I hold my wealth in Bitcoin. I earn in other coins and other networks. Yeah, I'm much more willing to take risk with other consensus rule sets than I am with my Bitcoin. Yeah, so I am biased in that. I am biased in that direction. I just don't think that they're competing with each other, right? I think they're different animals, and I don't get up every day and say I'm going to eat chicken today or ramen, and I'm going to eat that for the next 7 years. You know what I mean? So I look at it that maybe it's a little bit of sort of like intellectual honesty, and I think the most important thing is probably humility. Yeah, right. I mean, when I look at maximalists of any flavor, and they're out there like, this is the answer to everything, and screw this and screw that, you guys are wrong, and you're bad people because you believe in it. I don't really think that that's a crypto phenomenon. If we look around in society at the moment, everybody's pretty polarized, and everybody is really, like with blinders on about, whether it's their political belief or their gender identity or their religion or whatever. We seem to be living in this incredibly polarized time, that really turns me off, because in the end, I'm a surfer. I like when I hang out and chill out and want to get along with people, and I want to look at the sun and I want to smile, and you know what I mean. And so those sort of conflicts really, really, turn me off. And so I have my software biases, but I also have my cultural biases, and maybe I'm just a little bit more aware of my cultural biases, a little bit more self-reflected than people that are very extreme about their beliefs in our sector. And you combine that with all of the autism and everybody that's on the spectrum somewhere, all of these highly talented individuals that finally have some sort of like cultural say in what's going on around the planet. People can be pretty obsessive, and about expressing what they think is right. And I like being around that, but I don't think there's
that's part of the like energy that drives also the space, and that's also part of it. And so based on this question around the evolution of the space and all of that, my assessment is that we started with like highly idealistic people who wanted to use this technology to fix problems that are very complex, very difficult to understand. We use the reference of rabbit hole because it really takes probably years to like understand all the intricacies of like things like the Federal Reserve and governance, and like because most people just like as Steve Jobs said, life is made up, but everyone takes it as like it's just that's the way it is, and so I'm just gonna drive on those rails. When you start to like deconstruct the rails, it's a risky territory. We're also traumatized, like humanity, by times where we try to do things different and it went like super wrong. So people tend to like be, okay, I'm gonna keep things as they are because at least it has been safe for the last 20 years for me. Sure, there is a lot of corruption and abuses, but like so the motivation for people to go into the rabbit hole is like not so high. I'm talking now about like, you know, the broad people. Then you have this kind of like attempts to drive people towards the space through different dynamics. One of them is greed, like come here, you're going to buy this token and sell it at a higher price to the next guy. And this seems to create this kind of like, you know, waves of like, you know, bull markets. We have seen maybe, I don't know, I know 3, you probably have seen more. On the other side, there is like wisdom that moves much slower, and the knowledge and all the culture and all the like background of, you know, of knowledge that is necessary to embrace this technical. So technology is moving very fast, money is moving very fast, wisdom is moving slowly. What would be the 3, 4, 5 key principles that you would like people to, you know, to know about crypto, as like, you know, what should people know to really understand like what it does and why it's valuable for the world?
Okay, so I'd like to talk about a number of the things that you mentioned there. So this sort of, you know, Bitcoin was conceived as a casino, right? I mean, it's most definitely a casino, and a lot of prominent people in the space, you know, have said things like, you know, Bitcoin's not a get rich scheme; it's a get free scheme dressed up as a get rich scheme, right? That hasn't really happened in Bitcoin, but it has happened in all the networks that were spawned as a result of Bitcoin, right? And the stable coins that were built on top of it, right? So we can look at it and say that Bitcoin enabled people in Lebanon, right? Lebanon's basically running on USDT on Tron at the moment, you know, and people in South America and Africa are using USDT on Tron because it just works for them. They don't know anything about these, you know, the underlying principles. They know that it just works for them. Actually, that's our end goal. And so for me, it doesn't really matter if it's on a network that is centralized to a certain degree. It's a non-governmental network, and people can move out of it if they want to. I mean, there's a certain sort of like colonial arrogance, you know, a neo-colonial arrogance that I find in crypto, since it's primarily, you know, in Europe and America, so white male prominence is like, you know, we're gonna save the global South, you know, bank the unbank is the whole thing. And I'm like, wait, no, the whole point is to unbank the banked, you know, right? Sort of thing. So I find that to be that sort of like cultural arrogance that we're going to do something for people. And that's where a lot of this maximalism comes from in many crypto communities, is like, we know what's good for you, right? And my whole thing is like, no, man, I don't know what's good for you. And you know what? Maybe risking, you know, for 100 or 1000x gains is good for you. It's not good for me. But I don't think I have any right to say to people that they can't lose money. Yeah. And so this sort of like nanny position of the state, you know, that we're having now with regulation, protect the consumers. I mean, the only thing that the SEC and other, you know, alphabet soup agencies, FMA or whatever it is, all they've ever done is secure, you know, legacy interests, right? All they've ever done is enforce monopoly, rent-seeking behavior, and we see it's happening again now. It's definitely coming down the pipe, right? So there's, you know, there's a lot of noise out there amongst the signal, and we're always talking about educating people. And I don't think that, you know, this might be controversial, but I don't think that we need to educate everybody about all of the core values of cryptographic currencies and consensus rule sets, right? What we have to do is we have to create systems that are so simple for people to use that it's just another damn button on their phone, and we can have an argument, you know, about whether, you know, about the app stores and you know, the two giants in the room, and you know, that we don't actually have free devices and whatever. But currently, the most important thing is that it just works for people. Yeah. And so education is secondary, but for it to just work for people, you have to have evangelists like Anita Posh, who goes down to Africa and actually works in communities and shows people how to use a Bitcoin Lightning wallet, and links up with people that understand. And now I'm going to finally come to the message. What is it that we need to communicate to people? Is that cryptographic rights are human rights. Yeah, that's what this is about. The things that we're building, the principles that we build it upon, where we get lost in the weeds, is they're cryptographic tools are used to build software that people can permissionlessly get involved with. So opt in, right, to it on their own choice. It's not forced on them, and that the code bases are open source and not tethered by copyright, not tethered by corporate ownership, and in the best case, not censorship resistance to government regulation, right? So these are the key things, right? So I think that we can talk about privacy as well, but permissionless participation, censorship resistance, distributed networks. I don't think we've achieved decentralization. I don't know if we can actually achieve decentralization, but essentially we have achieved jurisdictional arbitrage by placing computer networks in different jurisdictions where governments can are either incompetent or don't want to regulate them. And this is probably the key message here. And this is a hard one for people to swallow, I think. Yeah. People say Bitcoin is for enemies. And actually, crypto is for enemies, right? So the whole idea of trustlessness is the most important thing that I think it is that we need to communicate to people. Trustlessness means that what the genius of Satoshi was removing the trusted third party and counterparty risk between two people who want to transact with each other. And the primary use case is, again, financial, but it's a transactional use case for anything, for communication, right? And so the idea behind that is that the only network which functions for everybody is a network that's built for enemies, meaning no one can stop anybody from using it, right? And we love that idea for currency, but we also love that idea for voting, for governance, for royalties and provenance in the arts, So all these things are combating rent-seeking and caretaker, sort of behaviors. So in the end, all these things that we're building are about human rights. Yeah, that's what this stuff is about.
Yeah, and so how do people who are not necessarily knowledgeable about all those topics discern all those topics? Discern like the real from like the fake. So we have seen, for example, an attempt in the last bull market for some companies to kind of blend crypto with Web3, and then Web3 is the metaverse, and kind of like build up a narrative where actually if you are in a video game, it's kind of Web3 and it's kind of crypto. And so, like how do we, draw the line and say, okay, crypto needs to have like those things
by not regulating it. The only way that people learn is by losing their shit.
Mm-hmm.
No laws have protected people from drugs, prostitution, or weapons. Why are laws or teaching going to protect people from crypto and scams? It's, the Latin is caveat emptor, buyer beware, right? And I come back to the idea of the nanny state, right? So it's always, we're protecting people. Everybody's so used to fear, it's like, that's why the insurance companies work. Okay, we have a distributed network, that's based on, really, really good. So mutual principles, everybody pays into a pot. When this house boils down, burns down, then it's less expensive for everybody to have paid a communal piece of that. But that stuff's all been corrupted, right? And so the I'm getting off topic again on what you're asking me, and you're asking me like, how do we educate people about the importance of a cryptographic key pair, which is a public and a private key pair, right? And I think we're just way ahead of ourselves. This stuff needs to be abstracted away and become part of the infrastructure of the way it is that the world functions. And the only way for that to happen is this wild west, of innovation, where some people lose. I mean, we've been saying for years, do not invest anything that you can't afford to lose, right? I don't know how many hundreds and thousands of times I've said that in different Discord servers, different Telegram channels, with people that I know, people that I think are really cool, people that I respect, people who look up to me as being this guy who knows what's going on, and they turn right around and stick all of their fucking money into that coin that they think next week they're going to sell on to the greater fool, So my answer is that this sort of this unregulated nature of what we're doing eventually will result in systems that are implemented at a larger institutional and societal level. It's going to be painful getting there, but we haven't got there by allowing innovation to only be approved by the state, right? So that's what the internet's brought us. That's what all of our electronic devices brought us, is this real-time, this real-time environment where we can all discuss these things with each other and whatever. But the dark side of that is that everybody who has a handy in his hand and can go anywhere in the world and go on Google Maps and go, how do I get from here to there? Which transportation possibility do I have? Okay, I don't understand that word. I can use Google Translate. And I'm not talking down about Google at this point, okay? These are amazingly empowering things, right? Any two people on the planet who have now a little Star Trek, communicator in their pocket is networked with everybody and the knowledge that's accessible all over the world. We can argue about how accessible it is and whatever, but day by day, the knowledge base is available to more and more people. You can't teach people not to be lazy. You can enable them to not be lazy, right? But the average, I'm lazy, aren't you? Do you do everything that you want and need to do, right? We all use these things, So the dark side of these incredibly enabling electronic devices, which network us and have created, or at least established an electronic hive mind that makes us aware of each other, everything that's going on around in the planet, is a completely different phase of human civilizational development. We're living in exponential times as a result of that, right? And this sort of immediacy that we all have to be able to have a chat with our loved ones or with the people that we disagree with, and video chats and calls and podcasts and everything, is that everybody thinks that because the media is so immediate, the change can be immediate, right? And change takes much, much more time. Yeah. So like our expectations, because of the media that we use, is far higher for the, is in conflict with how the rate at which software can be developed. We have the idea of the mythical man hour, right? And people are like, okay, I'm going to code this in X hours. And it's always a factor of 10 or 20 or 30, you know what I mean? Before things get done. And so you have all these people, Discord, Telegram, Twitter, Zoom calls, all of these different things. Everybody is like immediately in contact with each other. Everybody knows that the world needs to change, and everybody's got these great things that are happening, and this new consensus rule set, and this new coin, and okay, and all this money. We've made all this money for ourselves that we can, distribute with each other. And I'm willing, you're willing to take, I don't know, 4 NFTs from me because you like that NFT. You like Miladies, and I got 5 Miladies because I did something. And those things are worth in your local currency X, right? So you're willing to take them, and then you bridge them on Uniswap or sell them on OpenSea, for whatever token it is that you want. All of this sort of like immediacy has fucked up people's expectations about how fast society and civilization can actually adapt and change to these things, right?
Yes, I also think we haven't done digesting all the implications of internet. You know, it's still like internet is still very young, and this exponential curve is is like adding on top of it, and yeah, it will take a lot of time for us to readjust things. And actually, back to the topic you touched on, which is how institutions and how crypto will potentially integrate some of the components of institutions, and that's part of the process. We are very interesting these days in the topic of identity. So there was a wave of innovation happening in the last few months around SSI. So SSI is, you know, very old stuff. It's been around for a long time, but now there is an awakening within the crypto space of we cannot continue being completely anonymous. We can not necessarily, you know, KYC everyone, but have use cases where identity can be digitally native. What do you like about this? What do you dislike about, you know, digital identity and like the idea of using like an intersection of NFTs and a bunch of stuff to like create your online persona?
Well, man, blockchains are scary when it comes down to identity. I'm going to take it up to maybe to like a really like high level, okay? Yeah, and forgive me for this, but I'm going to say, you know, truly where it is that I think that the problem lies, and we need to start thinking about that problem before it is that we can actually start engineering for it, and that, you know, that trickles down to identity and SSI and how we digitalize those things as a result of the technologies that we have, and to win efficiencies and, you know, and compete with dystopian things. The world is essentially at this point in time in the grip of punitive justice, punishment, right? We're punishing people always for the mistakes it is that they make. Yeah, that's our primary way that it is that we choose to educate and socialize people, is by punishing them for behavior it is that we don't want to see in society, right? And this is really, really antithetical to living with your neighbors. Where's forgiveness? Okay, I mean, this is really, really hippie shit. Okay, but how do we exist on a planet? How do we exist in civil society without having some form of forgiveness and restorative justice? Okay, the Catholic Church has one way they approach it. It's been corrupted. You pay for it. We know that since the Middle Ages, you know, from Chaucer, when thy coin in my cup shall ring, thy soul from heavens shall spring. Right? We have, it's not that we culturally, you know, and civilizationally have not dealt with these ideas, right? So you go to confession and you're forgiven for your sins, and then you're accepted back into society, right? Doesn't really work anymore. Yeah. And so I think that if you look at the wars that are going on, whether they're identity wars in terms of, you know, pronouns and gender identity, I mean, you know, there's people on the planet that have six nipples, okay? And 2 different genitals. And that's common in the animal world. It's common in the human world, as long as it is that we've been in here, because it's just part of scientific evolution. It's just part of, you know, like the reality of being a physical being on the planet. We haven't found the cultural ways to accept that each other are different, or to restore each other in each other's eyes when it is that we've, you know, done something that's not good from society. You can't keep killing people. You can't keep locking people up. You know, America has, you know, the largest percentage of the people on the planet imprisoned, you know, and we have, you know, another war going on here in Europe where we're killing each other because we have no ability we have not discovered a way to postulate and to give justice. Okay, so what are these things about? These things are about a war for justice. People want to feel that if they're wronged, that there's a way, there's a way that the wrong is corrected, right? And you can't kill people for everything, you can't imprison people for everything that they do wrong. We need a process for restoring our, a way for us to get along with each other. Now, when we come from that premise, we can start talking about what the functions of identity should be, right? And I'll come back to where it is that we said that in an earlier part of one of my monologues. I recognize that I talk a lot, okay, but you did invite me here to hear me. I need multiple identities. Yeah, right. I need multiple identities. I need an identity for people that I sexed with, that they can verify, and that identity needs to be different from my medical data. That needs to be different from my governance data, depending on what my citizenship is. And maybe I have dual citizenship. Maybe I'm resident in a country that allows me to participate in some form of voting. It needs to be separate from that. And the only thing that we've found that, is a proof of humanity is biometrics. And man, biometrics are really scary for me. Biometrics are really scary for me. I really, really, really don't want my DNA or any of my biometric data in databases. And I think I avoided it my whole life until it is that we had the swabs for COVID, right? There was just no way around it. You couldn't move in society. Everything was locked down. In Australia, you couldn't even, at some point, I couldn't go to buy food unless it is that so finally my DNA is in a data bank that I know at some point is going to be sold to somewhere, right? So we had the separation of business entities and states and all these things that states cannot do. And they're like, cool, all right, we won't do them. We'll just let business do it. There's no law against us buying all of this data from business. And so all of the data banks, basically we're all pretty fucked. We're already all fucked, all right? Iraq, eye scans, tests, social credit system, China, right? Like all of these technologies, WorldCoin now, like, hey, come on, scan your eyeball and we'll give you free money, and everybody's gonna get it, and people are like going and scanning their eyeballs. You know what I mean? So we're biometric data is really scary to me. So then we have this idea of soulbound tokens, NFTs, and all the. I think it's great to experiment with all of that stuff, right? And I have an ENS, exiled-surfer.eth that I got early, and they're like, great, okay, this is awesome. I can use this for all these things. Not so sure anymore. I can't wipe myself off the face of the planet digitally anymore, and that's why it is that actually you can talk to me as Michael Parenti now and see my face.
Based on that,
we have to have a different discussion, is what it is that I'm saying. Okay, we have to have a different paradigm discussion, and the reason why I'm excited and honored to come and talk to you and your generation, right, is because I don't see any hope in my generation. Okay, it's just all there. You guys have to have a different set of consensus rule sets about how it is that you determine each other's identity, right? What is a social proof? Why do you want to have identity? What do you want to use it for? What do you want to accomplish? And how do you resolve conflict with each other? How is it you guys are going to get along? It ain't going to get any easier, man. Climate change is coming, and right? We're in the middle of exponential change on the planet. And so I think you guys need to be having a different dialogue, right? Why do we need identity? And what do we want that identity to do for us? And I come back to, there is no one ring to rule them all. There is no one piece of identity to rule them all. I think a lot of my colleagues of my age have been, saying this for a long time. Is that you need to have multiple identities for multiple different reasons. Yeah. And I don't think that we've found a way to secure identity yet. I don't think that we've found a way to secure databases yet. We're talking about zero knowledge proofs. Those are very, very costly computationally. Okay, we're building them on level 2s, and But again, for the average person, man, I'll tell you what, I never wanted to know this much stuff, this much about what it is that I know about. I never wanted to get this deep into the rabbit hole, to think about all these things. So I think they're all great experimentations, but people talk about mass adoption. Man, we can't even serve 100 million simultaneous users for any application using blockchain technology.
Yeah, that's pretty clear. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and so
because it's not what it is, because it's not what blockchains are built for. Yeah. Blockchain is really, really good for finance. This is the state of the network as of this point in time. We know it couldn't have occurred after this, right? That's all that a block is a consensus about the state of a network, whether it's data or financial data or whatever it is, couldn't have happened before this point in time, after this point in time, because proof of work or proof of stake is built on top of it. That it always said. Now we're talking about pruning networks for scalability, and I mean, blockchains are not for that. What we need to have is different set of using cryptographic proofs to make data accessible to me, right? And allow me to determine who has access to that data. For that to happen, first of all, we need to have the functioning technology. Then we need to have a social consensus that uses it and forces our governance systems, because we can't live without governments. We have to have some form of organization, keeping the water on, but still we need to have, medical care, roads, bridges, or if we're not going to have cars, we need to have horse hitches and where the horses can shit on the road, if that's where it is. So we go back to it. So there's always going to be some sort of, need for governance. And so when we have functioning cryptographic primitives that can be applied to other database solutions that are non-blockchain based, then we can start talking about mass adoption, right? The next billion users. I swear to God, every time I see that, I don't care who says it, whether it's somebody I like and respect or somebody that I think is an idiot, the next billion users, I'm like, man, we might not even have a planet by the time the technology is ready for a billion users of crypto.
Do you think it's a product market fit versus UI UX issue?
The UI and UX of pretty much everything sucks, whether it's crypto or non-crypto. And that's a result of the operating systems that we're building our interfaces on. I don't even understand how somebody can use Windows. It literally makes me aggressive, right? So Apple has much more giving you the intuitive feel and those things. And, so there's certain established ways, that we know people think, their eye movements, what point of the screen you look on, where is the haptic, thing for it. There's libraries for these things, and everybody keeps trying to roll their own. Everybody comes up, you can't really do anything about it. It's just like a process that is to a certain degree, roadmapped and governed and anticipated. But I think that what you see happening in the space is that my generation has completely and utterly failed to win the respect and the admiration of your generation, right? And so your generation is like, we're going to roll our own shit because your shit doesn't work for us, right? And that comes right down to things that we know work for UI and UX, right? But I don't think that that's necessarily a crypto problem.
As we wrap up, I do want to ask if you had maybe maybe some sort of final thoughts or advice for builders, innovators, creators, yada yada in the space. What would it be?
Whew. Well, I mean, I don't want to sound too much like an old guy screaming at clouds, but I think that you guys need to be, I think people need to be doing, more self-research and self-education that goes backwards and might save some time in not repeating mistakes, is what I'd like to see. My parents said the same thing to me, but of course I didn't, you know, I didn't listen to them, or a lot of people didn't listen to them. I guess we need to make our mistakes ourselves regularly. So I want to give a positive message about that. Online a couple of days ago, somebody asked or put out a tweet that was like, what advice are you giving, right? And my advice was to not take anybody's advice, to make your own mistakes, and own your own victories, and to find a way to get along with each other that accepts that life is a process of experimentation and making mistakes and learning from it and forgiving each other. And touching grass is the thing that we say, don't forget that you're a human being, and don't forget that the person that you're arguing with about that code change or about that idea is also a human being. And that would be my biggest message, is that to not forget that you're building these things for people, not users. That's I think the largest change that I've seen as a result of being online and having these these playgrounds and these sandboxes which have financial incentives tied into them, is that people have really, because of the immediacy and the fact that we're connected across the planet, that they just forget that we're all people. And that's why we're building these things, is to enable people to communicate and transact with each other, that we're flesh, and blood beings. We love, we hurt, bleed. Keep in the forefront of your mind that if we don't find a way to get along with each other and enable each other and care for each other, we will no longer be here. We will cause our own extinction, which we're doing a pretty good job of. And that's a hard process. I think that we're going to see a lot, in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, of a lot of chaos, a lot more wars over resources and whatever. And I don't know how much role digital identity and digital currencies are going to play in actually solving those questions. So don't forget that you're a human being, and don't forget that the people that are working in this sector and on the planet are a human being also. And I think that if we keep those things in the forefront of our mind, and ask ourselves why it is that we're building what it is that we're building, and it doesn't have the nomenclature of product market fit, UI and UX, how many users do you have? We need to think smaller, is what I think. People are thinking far too big, and it looks to me like we need to have much more local community organizing, local community interaction. That means interacting with people outside of our areas of interest. And touching grass means a lot more than that. It means talking to the guy that you're buying your apples from, and not just going in and swiping with your Apple Pay or using a QR code for for a lightning transfer or whatever it is. We need to, don't forget to live.
Yes, Michael, this is wonderful. Very important that we remember, like you said, that we're doing all this with people, for people. Thank you so much, really, for your time and for all the insights, and just very, very invaluable conversation from you today. And thank you. And I don't know if you would like to share, like, where can our listeners find you, if anyone is listening to you and they're super interested in following you, where can they find you?
So my name is Exiled Surfer. It's all written together, EXILEDSURFER. And I've been around long enough and done enough things that if you type that into a search machine on any social media portal that creates media or distributes it, that's where you'll find me, except for Instagram and Facebook. I don't do those. But otherwise, that's how you find me, under the word Exiled Surfer. YouTube, there's playlists and things, and you can basically follow the breadcrumbs. And if you want to interact with me, of course, the place is still Twitter. Despite all the craziness, it's still where the eyeballs are and where you can reach and interact with people. I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Nostr, Telegram, Discord, other Farcaster. I mean, yeah, a lot of different places, but that's where you can find me, just by looking for Exiled Surfer. And happy to interact with anybody that has, questions or ideas different than mine, as long as it doesn't get personal.
Yeah, thank you everyone for watching us, listening to us today. If you want to get more involved in our community, make sure to follow us on our social platforms, and we're on Twitter as well, NEWFORUM_NCO, and we will have all the links in the description below, as well as Michael's links. And yeah, thank you again, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and I will see you in the next episode.